3 years ago, he launched a war on Ukraine. Now he's under pressure to stop it. Today, Vladimir Putin did not directly reject a 30-day ceasefire proposal, but raised multiple issues as to how it could be implemented.
We agree with the proposals for the ceasefire, but our position is based on the assumption that the ceasefire would lead to a long-term peace, something that would remove the initial reasons for the crisis. So the idea in itself is correct and we support it, but there are questions that need to be discussed, and I think we need to discuss this with our American partners. Maybe we need to have a call with President Trump and discuss this.
He spoke as US negotiators arrived in Moscow to formally put the ceasefire deal to the Russian government. They travelled on the instruction of President Trump, who believes he can convince President Putin to agree.
Well, we'd like to see a ceasefire from Russia. A lot of the details of a final agreement have actually been discussed. Now we're going to see whether or not Russia's there, and if they're not, it'll be a very disappointing moment for the world.
Ukraine says it wants the ceasefire, but it is clear they question if it will bring peace, as they dug more trenches close to the front line. Russia's position remains too unclear to say if their work will be wasted or not.
Our view is that it's merely a temporary break for the Ukrainian military and nothing else. Our goal is a long-term peaceful settlement taking into account our country's legitimate interests and well-known concerns. No one needs an imitation of steps towards peace.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's military have now been forced out of the one part of Russia they'd managed to occupy. After 7 months, large parts of Kursk are now liberated and back under Russian control. The Ukrainians had hoped to hold this land as a bargaining chip in any peace negotiations, but look set to lose it completely within days. The Russian leader in full military fatigues arrived in Kursk over the last 24 hours to reaffirm that Russian land is now in Russian control. When the Ukrainians seized it in August, it was the first time since the Second World War that Russian territory had been occupied by a foreign military. The Russian onslaught on Ukraine continues even as others talk of the possibility of peace. There is no sign of it here, and no great optimism either. Emma Murphy, ITV News, Kyiv.
Well, our US correspondent Dan Rivers is in Washington for us tonight. And Dan, it seems as though President Putin is prepared to work with the United States. So what happens next?
Well, there's been a lot of kind of frantic shuttle diplomacy going on over the last 24 hours. You've got Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's point man in all this, who is currently in Moscow, as you saw in Emma's report, with speculation that he may even have a face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin tonight. Then you've got the kind of, that's the carrot, if you like. The stick, on the other hand, is the threat of sanctions from the US onto Russia. Today, Donald Trump was speaking in the Oval Office, again opened up the idea of either meeting himself, Vladimir Putin, or certainly having a phone call with him.
They have very serious discussions going on right now with President Putin and others, and hopefully they all want to end this nightmare. He put out a very promising statement, but it wasn't complete. And yeah, I'd love to meet with him or talk to him, but we have to get it over with fast.
A lot of this is going to come down to the sort of nitty-gritty of which bits of land Ukraine is willing to give up. A lot of it is going to come down to what's going on in Kursk, that tiny little bit of Russia that the Ukrainians have taken. The Russians are pushing forward there, and it may be at the moment that Vladimir Putin feels that they have the momentum with them and he's playing for time.